Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei skipped content episode review thingy. We are on Season 2, Part 1, Episode 7. I don't know why I'm doing that. I literally don't have the hands to do anything. This was a bad idea. I can't be all Italian and like wave my hands around anymore. I'm not Italian, but like I'm Italian at heart, right? I gotta do the hand gestures, but I can't because I have this in my hand, and the best that I can do is going like that. It's a pizza pie. Anyway, let's get into things. So the anime starts us off and shows us a day in the life of Fitz, which I already covered last episode. Although the light novels at the time tried to convince the reader that Fitz wasn't Sylvie and they interacted with each other. They literally talked to one another. So I do think that it's worth viewing if you missed it. And so instead of starting off with Juliet and Zenobia like in the anime, I'll be going over a pretty good backstory of Linnea and Pursena. Linnea Dodolia, the granddaughter of Gustav, who is the leader of Dodolia, one of the Dodolia tribes who protects the Great Forest. She is the daughter of Guys, next in line to be the tribal leader. And then there's Pursena Adoldia, who comes from the Adoldia tribe, another defender of the Great Forest. She is the granddaughter of the Adoldia's tribal leader, Bulldog, and the daughter of the warrior leader next in line to be the tribal leader, Tertelia. The Dolia tribe were a special race among the beast folk, and their roots could be traced back almost 5,500 years to the aftermath of the first Great Human-Demon War, which had involved a war between humans and beast folk. The humans had won the war, which resulted in many beast folk being enslaved and treated like animals. Faced with an impending invasion, the beast folk that lived in the Great Forest took a stand. Their elf at the time, the beast god Geiger, I don't know, had rallied the beast folk together to take down the humans and even fought in the front lines himself. Even after the beast god had passed away, the Dolia tribe were revered as chief among the beast folk of the Great Forest. Nowadays you could find beast folk nearly anywhere in the world, from the central continent to the Begort continent. They never dominated in numbers anywhere other than the Great Forest, but their influence was enough that they couldn't be ignored, since they had the power and respect among elves, dwarves, and the hobbits. There was enough military power in the Great Forest to go toe-to-toe with Millis if they wanted to, which is kind of crazy. Since Linnea and Pursena were the granddaughters of the Dolia tribal leaders who descended from the beast god, they would either become tribal leaders one day themselves or marry someone who would. Comparing them to humans, you could basically say that they were princesses. Princesses with no less importance than those in Millis. And so that's why when they first entered the school, they had the highest social standing among all the students there. The reason why the two girls had even enrolled at the school in the first place is because of the previous generation's prince, Guys, and the princess, Ghislaine, were total failures, and both Linnea and Pursena were following right into their footsteps. So in order to educate the two girls, Gustav had ordered them to study in a far-off land so they could find wisdom there, so that they could be in a place where they wouldn't exert such authority. Unfortunately for Gustav, at the University of Magic, because they were princesses of the Dolia tribe, their power still remained. When the two first enrolled, they thought that they'd be treated like dirt, and so they were pretty timid around the humans. However, it seems that the humans were far more timid and scared of them, and that obviously went straight to their heads. They soon realized that with the combination of the magic they learned in class, their voice magic, which had been passed down through the Dolia tribe, dexterity, superb strength, and all that was enough to bring even the toughest upperclassmen to their knees. And so they got worse and worse, extorting people, blackmailing, and bullying. In a single year, they had become the bosses of their own faction. However, that didn't last too much longer after Ariel, Fitz, and Luke had enrolled. Everyone who had once respected and feared Linnea and Pursena then turned their eyes to Ariel. For about 6 months, Linnea and Pursena had endured Ariel, but after that is when they started to bully her, and it was soon after that Fitz put the two girls in their place. For the full context of that, check out my episode 0 skip content. It's honestly crazy how much I reference it. I know it's important, but I didn't realize just how important it was. Like every other episode, I swear I'm telling you to go back to watch it. So I'm sorry for those who have watched that video. Thank you. And I'm sorry. I bet I sound like one of those YouTubers who go like, hey, subscribe. You should subscribe. You haven't subscribed, right? You should totally subscribe, when you have already subscribed like 5 years ago and you just want them to shut up and get on with the video. Oh, is that what I'm doing? I'll get on with the video. Sorry. Anyway, their social standing took a nosedive and instead took their anger out on two students that had enrolled in the previous year, Zenoba and Cliff. The two girls were still bullies, but in comparison to their actions like back then, you could say that they've been rehabilitated. And now, finally, we can get into the main contents of the episode. I feel like that I had to do it, eventually start things off with like something 100% skipped, and then finally talk about the actual episode halfway through the video. However, the difference here is that in the light novel, things for the next bit are from Zenoba's point of view. It had been a month since they purchased Juliet, and she had finally been able to cast earth magic via silent spellcasting, although she still had a lot of work ahead of her. But in comparison to Zenoba, he thought that it was very impressive. The method of how Rudeus taught her is to have her use an incantation only once and then perform it using silent spellcasting. Zenoba had his doubts, but sure enough, it eventually worked. From there, Rudeus had been teaching Juliet the human tongue, that of which she had already known a bit from living in the central continent with her parents for a short while. And so to quote Zenoba's thoughts, he goes like, "That bastard of a merchant had lied to me when he said that she only knew Beast God." But it's likely that he just didn't know because Juliet just never spoke. But anyway, Juliet was definitely a worthwhile purchase and was good at simple tasks as well, like grabbing things that Zenoba needed without any further detailed instructions. She had a good intuition of what he wanted, and it reminded him of Ginger. Normally, slaves are marked with some kind of brand or magical seal, but since Rudeus didn't like that, Zenoba refrained from doing so. Plus, they wanted to raise Juliet more as like a pupil than that of a slave. And it's then that Rudeus asks about the Roxy figure, and Zenoba doesn't lie about it. He thinks about saying that he left it enthroned, but he never says that because he would never lie to his master. It really hurt me when I saw that Zenoba lied to Rudeus. Like, nah. They don't understand Zenoba like I do. But Zenoba then soon confessed, and he had felt the anger of a god coming from Rudeus. But then he explained the situation. It was, due to obviously Linny and Pursena, but it's likely that it was like that scene where they put him in his place and started to bully him after that. Right, we've heard about that scene a couple times before. Zenoba thought that he could take them on, being a Miko and all, but he had sorely underestimated them. It's not because they're physically strong, because you'd have to be a literal god to hurt Zenoba physically. With a combination of voice magic as well as advanced tier magic, they were able to swiftly take him down, win his most valuable possession, call it gross, and then smash it. After Rudeus said that he'd teach the two a lesson, these were the only thoughts that were running through Zenoba's head. Linny and Pursena were going to die tonight. Of that, I was certain. He really wants them dead. But now after this, we jump back into Rudeus' point of view. Rudeus obviously hates bullies and hates the idea of people destroying something that someone else had worked tirelessly on. It's almost as though if you built a computer and somebody took a bat to it. Coincidentally, just like what happened with Rudeus in his past life. If it were any other figure, Rudeus might have let it slide, but they trampled on Roxy. They were being punished. They didn't understand how much Rudeus looks up to Roxy and worships her, and so he had to make those mongrels realize the gravity of what they had done. Rudeus reminds Zenoba that they aren't there to kill them, just punish. And as for how they were going to take them down, Rudeus would like to take them down separately, but they're always together. And together, the two of them had a tight strategy that was quite adaptable. One of them would charge into battle using magic and whatnot to distract the opponent, while the other would use voice magic to paralyze the opponent. This was the exact strategy that they used to take down Zenoba and anyone else that got in their way, really. However, the thing that is indeterminable is their strength. Zenoba thinks that Rudeus could take them down on his own, which is probably true, but because Eris is the same age as them, Rudeus is thinking that they're about as strong as her, which he couldn't even beat Eris in a fight. I mean, if he went all out, went for the kill, he probably could, and he even admits that, but that's not what he's trying to do here. Rudeus also admits to Zenoba that there are 4 others that are stronger than himself, that he knows of anyway. To which Zenoba is in disbelief, and those 4 would obviously be Eris, Ruijerd, Ghislaine, and Orsted. Interestingly enough, he didn't list Paul in there, which is arguable. If he thinks that Eris is stronger than him, then Paul definitely is as well. I know that they had a fight, and Rudeus won, but Paul was drunk. It was it wasn't a sneak attack, but it definitely wasn't. It was more of a sneak attack on Rudeus, if anything, but because there is a debate on which of the two is stronger that I've seen online, Paul or Eris, and to be honest, I could see either of them winning, but I think in most cases, Paul gets the victory due to overall experience and just raw skill. She may be faster than him possibly and has a couple things that trump Paul, but she doesn't yet have the mindset of a veteran sword fighter. Anyway, Rudeus wants to recruit both Fitz and Alenalise to this battle, but Fitz is too busy, and Alenalise would probably likely refuse because she just doesn't care because it's a figure. That cold-hearted woman. In most cultures around the world, an ancient tradition is to send a letter with a knife and a single flower as a declaration of battle. But among Dolia tribes, throwing rotten fruit at your opponent's head was supposedly the equivalent of that method, but Rudeus had no real way to verify it. However, Rudeus opts to a different method, a surprise attack. Zenoba questions him and thinks that it's pretty underhanded, but Rudeus shuts that down because there's one thing that he doesn't understand. This wasn't a duel. This was a holy war, and all that mattered was to win. However, Rudeus quickly gave up on the idea of a surprise attack due to the beast folks' keen smell and hearing, and so they decided to just ambush the two. Waiting outside for a really long time for the two to arrive, because despite their delinquent nature, they happen to attend classes regularly. Zenoba and Rudeus stand in silence. And finally, Lydia and Pursena arrive, and the fight is basically adapted 1-to-1, except for Rudeus' comparison to the other people that he had fought in the past. Originally, he had thought that because Eris and the two girls were the same age, they'd be similar in strength. But that was far from the truth. He compared Linnea and Pursena to Paul and Eris, which is funny because I literally just mentioned them earlier. Eris would never have gone in a roundabout way of attacking like Linnea did and would have taken the shortest route to get to him. And once he hit her in the chin, Eris wouldn't have let herself get hit by a second attack and would have purposely fallen backwards. I did say that it was a 1-to-1, but in the book, Rudeus did take out Linnea by palm striking her jaw, then punching her in the temple before stomping on her chest and knocking her out with a stone cannon. But the point is, Eris wouldn't have gotten hit by that second attack, let alone probably the first one, to be honest. But even if she did get knocked to the ground, she would have grappled him and launched her next attack. Rudeus would have never been able to get his foot on her chest either. The moment he'd try, she would grab his knee or ankle and just break it. Not that that would really stop his stone cannon, though. And then there's Pursena. If Eris saw the quagmire happen, she wouldn't have let herself slip in it, and even if she did, she'd regain balance immediately or stop before she went any further in and pulled herself out. Of course, she wouldn't have known all of this from the get-go. This is all knowledge that she has from previous sparring matches with Rudeus. And then there's Paul, who had found a very similar way to deal with Rudeus' attacks, even on the first occasion that he'd ever seen them. Once again, it's just pure experience that he has over Eris. But an advanced tier swordsman with good experience like Paul could easily avoid something like his quagmire. Even some beasts in the wild were able to avoid Rudeus' quagmire, although a worm wasn't able to, I guess, oddly enough. But the point is, it's not necessarily that Linnea and Pursena are weak, it's just that Rudeus had finally realized that Eris and Paul were strong. What he needs to realize himself is that he is strong. Of course, stay humble, but know your strength, man. Anyway, they call Juliet over and tie the girls up. However, now it seems as though Juliet is scared of Rudeus now. Poor girl. But then there's the interrogation scene. Again, it goes pretty similar, although there are a few extra details. It heals up both Linnea and Pursena in the book, and although he's somewhat into the whole BDSM stuff, it's very different watching it on screen compared to seeing it in real life. He really got nothing out of it. But seeing them tied up certainly got some pheromones going, which Pursena smelled. She apparently has a better nose than Linnea, and so she was the only one who could smell it. And so Rudeus had felt her chest, but afterwards those pheromones had gone away, much to Pursena's relief and confusion. Then the reason why Rudeus lets Pursena talk first is because Linnea wouldn't stop glaring at Rudeus and looked as though she was ready to yell. However, it's clear that it isn't just Linnea that misunderstands the situation that they're in right now, as Pursena shows no signs of remorse with everything that she said. And again, he's reminded of his brother smashing his PC, and although he didn't want to remember such memories, the situation did strike a chord with him and force those similar feelings to reappear. Rudeus starts to think of a punishment that could work that won't get him in trouble with the school, or any governments or tribes for that matter, or even Ruijerd. He asks Zenoba for his thoughts, but he of course just wants to see them in the same state that they left his figure, so Rudeus is dry of ideas. And that's when he goes to Fitz the next day. The only thing that the anime skipped out was that Rudeus had explained the situation in the Great Forest and how he became acquainted with Guys and Gustav. And although Rudeus calls the sacred beast mutt, he doesn't mean it in a bad way. Normally that's a bit of an insulting term, I guess, for a dog. It'd be like calling Roxy a disgusting demon, but Rudeus had kind of turned it into a bit of a nickname for the sacred beast. Anyway, Rudeus and Fitz had returned to his room to find a lot of urine. They cleaned the floor, the clothes, and the girls before they bowed down, still not wearing anything on their lower halves, begging for forgiveness. Overall, similar scene, but Rudeus had teased and threatened them just a little bit more. They both understood why they shouldn't make fun of Roxy, and Pursena had added that she had done something similar to be chased by the Temple Knights. So Rudeus said, "Oh yeah, now that I think about it, my aunt is a member of the Temple Knights, actually." And they became even more scared. And as the two get a little bit lippy with Rudeus, it's a little bit different how it goes in the books. In the anime, it kind of just felt like them being snotty and just them being rude. But in the books, it was portrayed more. They said basically the same things, but in a way, they kind of just, the girls tried to make Rudeus feel bad about himself. And that he was the bad guy. And he was kind of just ready to let them off the hook like that. And this is how it goes in the books because I like the wording of it. "You haven't learned your lesson, have you?" Master Fitz said. "Fitz, this has nothing to do with Yunya." "That's right, fuck off." Pursena says fuck. She is amazing. Anyway, it's after that they're subjected to the paint. And on it is just as you see in the anime. The fake mustache, unibrow, and writing on the cheek that reads, "I'm a dog who lost Rudeus," and "I'm a cat who lost Rudeus," respectively. However, they not only had paint on their face that Fitz would wash away in a week, but they had paint all over their body that they had to leave on for 6 months before Fitz would wash it off. Fitz does say that it is a spell circle paint that can be washed off with mana somehow. I don't know how that works. However, we know that he doesn't use that kind of paint on them, but it is stated that that kind of paint does exist somehow out there. Anyway, Fitz and Rudeus talk for a while in his room as he tries Rudeus's pillow, which was filled with the seeds of a mustard treant, one of the monsters that lived in the forest of the Northern Territories. If you broke the seed open, there was a nut inside that looked very similar to a walnut, but its shell resembled a buckwheat chaff, which are kind of like tiny little crescent shells. He had broken it down and stuffed it into a pillowcase though, and he covered the outside with beast fur. So it doesn't look like it does in the anime because it's like a bright blue modern day looking pillow that Rudeus made. That's not what it looks like. Anyway, the next day, Rudeus then shows Zenoba the face of the Jolia girls, and he was unimpressed, to say the least. But Rudeus then fixed the Roxy figure, then Zenoba had a bright smile. After that, he apologized to Linny and Pursena, but they just shrugged it off for the most part. And now we have 3 more parts to cover, one of which was partially covered in episode 9 for whatever reason, and something else that was just entirely skipped. The first of the 3 was Side Story, Sylphiette, Part 2. Now, just like the first Sylphie side story, it's presented as though Fitz is not Sylphie, although the walls, you could say, were breaking between the two. Although she is Sylphie in the story, Fitz is nowhere to be seen, but because the story refers to her as Sylphie, so will I. Basically, it starts off with Sylphie watching Rudeus hang out with either Zenoba, Julie, like Linnea, or Pursena. It's kind of a different person every time she sees him. But no matter what, she couldn't talk to him because she always had to attend to Ariel's needs. Out of all of them, Sylphie noticed that Rudeus and Pursena were especially close with each other, even taking healing class together. All beastfolk women do have large breasts, but Pursena's were like a cut above the rest, and he is a grey rat, so could it be that they're in a relationship of sorts? During class, did they sit together? Was she asking him questions and was he helping her out, teaching her things? Were they sharing a textbook together? All the things that Rudeus and Sylphie used to do, was he now doing that with someone else? It kind of hurt her. And as she thought this, Ariel snapped Sylphie out of her trance and questioned her about always staring at Rudeus. She gave Sylphie a genuine smile of amusement. However, it's when Sylphie said that she hadn't told Rudeus her name yet that both Ariel and Luke grew frustrated. And Luke also realized that he had made a mistake earlier, back when he, harassed Rudeus. He feels bad about that. Ariel is surprised, given how unique Sylphie's hair is, that Rudeus wouldn't recognize her. And the reader is supposed to assume, the green hair color, of the Superds. So, of course, it's going to be unique. However, we obviously know the truth that Ariel isn't talking about her green hair, rather her silver hair, a color that Rudeus wouldn't recognize from Sylphie. Luke gave a suggestion that if, perhaps since he's a Noto's grey rat, that if she threw a curvy woman at him, to which Sylphie kind of yelled absolutely not, and she cut him off. This is the first time that she's ever raised her voice against the princess and Luke, but they're pretty chill about it. Ariel then asked Sylphie a question that she had asked many times before. Is there something you want to do with your life? And the answer was always, I want to serve you, princess. Ariel wasn't satisfied with the answer, was clearly looking for something else, something related to Rudeus, obviously. And Sylphie knew that, but she couldn't say it. It felt like she was betraying the princess if she did. After that, Ariel gave Sylphie a true warm-hearted smile, something that she would only see maybe once a year. The smile was much more frequent back when Sylphie first met Ariel in Asura, but times have changed. And Ariel said, I won't rush you on this Rudeus matter. I don't mind if you use fits either. Do whatever you like. The reason behind why Ariel is fine with Sylphie exposing her identity or abusing her power to get with Rudeus is because Ariel is after Rudeus herself. Not for any perverted or romantic or even an evil reason, but for political power. She wants Rudeus on her side, and if Sylphie gets close with Rudeus again, then that gives Ariel more power. The reason why she invited Rudeus to the school in the first place is to have him be her follower. But Sylphie didn't really want that. She didn't want Rudeus to serve Ariel. She didn't want him to get close with Linnea and Pursena. She wanted Rudeus and her to stand shoulder to shoulder as equals. She wanted to have an exclusive relationship with Rudy, a relationship that no other person had with him. She's sounding a little toxic right now, it's you're not allowed to hang out with any of these people. I want you just for myself. But she's coming from a wholesome place, right? She's not being toxic. But that is Sylphiette Part 2. And now next up is the epilogue. We kind of get an update on how everyone's doing. 3 months have passed since Rudeus had enrolled, and every day kind of looked the same to him. However, because he hadn't been to a school in many years, plus with what he's being taught and what he's doing, it's not like he's not enjoying life at the moment. Juliet and Zenoba's relationship has grown quite a bit. Despite his one-track mind for dolls, he does seem to be treating Juliet almost like a sibling. Then again, it made sense considering he tried to name her after his younger brother. Juliet, however, seemed to be kind of afraid of Rudeus, and Zenoba suggests that it's because she sees Rudeus as a fairy tale monster called the Hole Monster. The monster would take bad children, turn the ground to mud, and trap them, stuff them in a bag, and bring them back to his lair. And when they eventually reappear, they were so well behaved that it felt as though they were entirely different people. Almost exactly like what Rudeus had done with Lydia and Pursena. The two Beastfolk princesses, speaking of which, were now calling Rudeus boss and were giving him more respect, although it did feel a little fake to him. However, they did genuinely respect him because they respect his strength. Pursena said so with her tail wagging, so you know she wasn't lying. And although Linnea was warming up to Rudeus too, it did feel like she didn't care as much as Pursena does, but she did show true remorse for her actions. And Alenalise and Rudeus' relationship had changed a little bit as well. They were still friendly with each other, but lived very different lives from each other on campus. Surprisingly, despite her manhunt always going on, she had been earnestly attending classes and learning. She is paying for tuition after all, so she might as well make the most out of it. And thanks to Alenalise pointing it out, Rudeus had made a lot of friends, all of which who were girls. Rudeus protests and said that there were a couple guys in there, but that's apparently what Paul had said when Alenalise said that to him back in the day as well. But if Rudeus included Alenalise as a friend, there are certainly more girls than guys that he was friends with. But unknowns to Rudeus, however, there were two pairs of eyes watching him. One was the gaze of a young boy who had just left homeroom, and the other was a mysterious lady who wore a featureless white mask over her face. However, while all of this was happening, after embarking on a ship from the demon continent to the central continent with a certain elf woman, a man, or rather a demon, had made his way to the Ogre tribe's island, Ogre Island, which was led by the strong warrior called the Ogre God. The tribe were demons that did not participate in the Great Human-Demon War nor in Laplace's War and kept to themselves on their island, and so not many consider them to be even demons actually, and even fewer knew of their existence entirely. Ogres were very strict on who they let in their island and would kill any unknown travelers. However, they were lenient when it came to familiar faces, such as this particular immortal demon king who had visited them 2 years ago now. While he was there, he had sparred against the ogre god, drank with the tribe, trained their young, and was accepted as one of the ogres. However, one day a letter had arrived from the elf woman that traveled to the continent with him. And it read, "I found the person that we were looking for in one of the 3 magic nations. In a few more months, we'll be headed to the Renoa University of Magic." And so, he got up, much to the ogre's sadness, and left for none other than Renoa Magic University. Batagati was coming. And now, finally, we have the extra chapter, Juliet and Manners. It was noon on an ordinary day, and Zenoba, Juliet, and Rudeus were having lunch outside, which more students, mostly from the first floor, had taken their lead and started doing the same. However, these students were rather sloppy eaters. Rudeus didn't want Juliet to pick up on these manners, and sure enough, she started eating with her hands. Rudeus told her to use a fork and to eat her carrots, to which she gave him a terrified look, while Zenoba questioned Rudeus' motives. He doesn't think that Juliet needs to eat with a fork or eat carrots since it has no effect on figure making. And he kind of starts to argue with Rudeus, surprisingly. Hearing this, Elenalise comes over and teaches Juliet the right way to eat. And that is to raise your chin, stick your tongue out, and let the food seductively enter your mouth. I'm not going to do that in its entirety. Okay, I know I've done some weird things on the channel, but I'm not doing that. Anyway, as she demonstrated with a piece of bacon, Rudeus slaps it out of her hand, and right before it was about to hit the ground, something immediately snatched it up. Enter Linnea and Pursena, with Pursena scarfing down the bacon happily. She tells Rudeus not to waste food, especially meat, and if there's any meat that he doesn't want, he could just give it to her instead, all this with her tail wagging. And now Linnea and Pursena join the debate. Pursena surprisingly says that manners are important. It's particularly unacceptable to use your hands to eat during meals. She says while holding a piece of dry meat that she was actively chewing on. And then Linnea shares her thoughts and says that manners are important for a lady. Being picky is an absolute no-no. But Pursena chimes in and says that Linnea had left the dried grapes on her plate before, and then the two got into an argument. Overall, not really helpful, and Juliet was rightfully confused. And then seeing the commotion at the table, Fitz shows up and Rudeus explains the situation to him. Surprisingly, Fitz thinks that Juliet doesn't exactly need to learn manners at the moment. Give it a few years and then she should be fine. This is because she not only has to learn earth magic, but also to attempt to make figures and help Zenobia whenever he requests it, all while learning the human tongue. That's a lot for a 6-year-old to handle. Add on etiquette on top of that, it's just a bit too much. But now we were back to 50-50. Zenobia, Elenalise, and Fitz don't think that it's necessary, while Rudeus, Linnea, and Pursena think that it should be taught. However, there's one person at the table that hasn't given their opinion on all of this. Juliet. Juliet, who was looking anxious until now, was surprised and thought that she wouldn't get an opinion here. After a moment of thinking, she had made up her mind. She grabbed the fork, stabbed all the carrots on her plate, and ate each and every one of them, although she, of course, acted like she was gonna throw up and chugged a cup of water afterwards. But everyone cheered and congratulated her on her achievement, and now starting tomorrow, Rudeus was willing to teach her some table manners. Juliet says, "Yes, please, Grandmaster." And that is what she calls Rudeus, by the way. But there you have it. Juliet is learning manners. How adorable. It's such an adorable little pointless story. I love it. It's so cute. I understand why the anime skipped this. It has no reason to really be here, but it's still adorable. But anyway, that's basically it. There's quite a bit today. A good bit of skipped stuff. Was any of it important? I don't know about that. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.